That's what a heart transplant is, right? We remove an organ from a brain dead patient, right? There is one organ, and as far as the heart is concerned, it is healthy.
So that's what the doctor says, but you donate, you're doing an act of charity, human solidarity to a lot of people. People need to live, and without donations, they perish.
Not? So we found someone who needed this heart, right? Let's put it this way. Generally to population, legal understanding. So you had an operation to remove this organ from the heart, right? And transplant it to another patient. So we have 11 dedicated teams. So we usually do heart surgery there, right? On average, 2 surgeries per day. Unfortunately, she didn't do it the way it should. A very rare syndrome is called post-cardiectomy syndrome, which is a syndrome related to heart surgery. That patient's heart is dead, isn't it? Then she was locked up in the appliance. No, maintaining the maintenance of other organs so the heart doesn't work, but it's like an artificial heart that works all the time, isn't it? As long as she's in the priority queue for transplants, right? Given the seriousness of the case, she could not be mobilized by those who had stabilized, and the remedies did not work. Yes, God is over, isn't it? I had a great deal of faith that God reached out, and the story and organs were wonderful, and it turned out to be in the same city, the same hospital. Oh my gosh, it's a book! You have a daughter, I remember this event today. In the same hospital, we can say it's a matter of meters. In the other ICU, compatible hearts show up, don't they? Then there was the whole race, and she was transplanted. I've written a lot about
Sometimes the most important part of a book's story, it actually gets written after it's already published. It's one of those rare and really profound moments when life doesn't just imitate art, it completely redefines it. So this is the book we're talking about, 2018, Be Not Afraid. It's by Dr. Dario Santuchi, who's a physician, and it came out on December 1st, 2024. Now, at first glance, yeah, it's a work of fiction, but its roots, well, they run deep into the very real world of medicine, of life, and of loss. The whole book is really built on this unique foundation of the author's own life. It takes his direct experiences as a doctor, the wins, the tragedies, all those quiet moments in a hospital, and it transforms them into these fictional stories. And the author is really clear about this. This isn't a diary. It's not a memoir. The idea here is to explore the universal truths of his job through the lens of fiction. That gives him the freedom to really get to the emotional heart of these events. And this is the book's powerful central theme, stated right there on the cover. It's all about exploring that breaking point, physically, emotionally, spiritually, that he saw so often in his patients and their families. It's a theme that would very soon take on a new, almost unimaginable weight.
So, to really understand the story that happened next, we have to look really closely at the book's first few pages, specifically at the dedications. In the dedication, Dr. Santucci lists his 4 children, Davy, Mariana, Daniel, and Dario Neto. It's a simple, beautiful tribute, but there's something truly remarkable about that very last name. You see, when this book was printed and sent out into the world, Dario Neto hadn't been born yet. His name was included as an act of faith, of hope, and of love for a son who was on his way. That dedication was a promise for a future that was just about to arrive. And this brings us to the crucial pivot of the whole story. Because just weeks after publishing a book all about the limits of human endurance, the author's own heart would be put to the ultimate test. The book's story was done. It was finished. But the story of its author was about to gain this tragic and profound new chapter, a story that lasted just 10 days. 20 days after the book's release, on December 21st, Dário Neto was born. For the next 10 days, he fought a battle for his life. On December 30th, he passed away. And then, on the very last day of the year, his family said goodbye. Dário Neto arrived into a world filled with immense love, but also just immense challenges. He had to have major abdominal surgery shortly after he was born, and in his father's own words, he fought with a courage that completely defied medical explanation through the difficult days that followed. And in an instant, all those themes Dr. Santucci had explored as a writer, they weren't literary concepts anymore. They became his life. The theoretical became just devastatingly real. Right here, the author found himself at this terrible intersection. On one hand, he had the clinical understanding of a doctor, but on the other, he was experiencing the raw, unfiltered pain of a father. 2 perspectives, but one single heartbreak. The book he had just published was suddenly transformed. It wasn't just a collection of stories inspired by his work anymore. It became a testament to the life of his son and the pain of his loss. And that phrase, when the heart can't take it anymore, now it carried the full weight of his lived experience. It wasn't just a metaphor anymore. Not at all. As the author himself wrote, the book was published just before he would face the greatest test of its central theme in his own life. The tragic irony of that, it's just almost impossible to comprehend. In the wake of this incredible tragedy, Dr. Santucci made a decision. His son's story, it had to become a formal part of the book that had, in a way, been waiting for it all along. He chose to add an annex to the book's introduction. I mean, an annex is simply an addition, right? But here, its purpose was so much more profound. It was to make sure that the story of Dário Neto would be permanently bound to the work that already carried his name. And he was very, very clear about why he did this. This wasn't about adding some personal detail for the reader's sake. It was a tribute. It was a father making sure his son's brief, brave life was honored and remembered forever. And so, the book's story really finds its true conclusion in this new, final dedication. A dedication that captures this incredible journey from a promise on a page to a love that is now eternal, forever changing the meaning of every word that came before it. Let's go back to 2018. Brazil was in the middle of some massive, convulsive change. And right at the heart of it all, a single phrase kind of sets the stage for the story we're about to dive into. Non tenhas medo. Be not afraid. It's a story about what happens when the human heart, well, it just can't take anymore. Now, listen, can you hear that? That is the soundtrack to our story. It's the relentless, just implacable beeping of heart monitors. And inside a coronary care unit, this isn't just noise, right? It's the rhythm of life itself. It's this constant, unsettling reminder of the super thin line between a steady pulse and silence. So, our scene is set in Linhares, Brazil. And at the very center of this world of sound and silence, we're about to meet our main character. You see, while the whole country outside was the storm of clashing politics and social upheaval, inside the walls of the hospital, a whole other kind of battle was being waged every single day. It was quieter, for sure, but no less intense. It was a struggle for life. And this is our protagonist, Dr. Dario Santucci. He was only 33 years old, but for him, this wasn't just a job he clocked in and out of. Nope, he had already found his true calling. Dr. Dario was living a life that was all about balance. I mean, he was a brilliant doctor, a totally dedicated father, and a loving husband. Each one of those roles demanded everything from him. But somehow, he managed to be all 3. And this right here, This was his philosophy. For Dr. Dario, medicine wasn't just about crunching clinical data. It was really the art of walking that incredibly fine line between hard science and the profound mystery of life itself. A delicate balance of technical precision and, well, unwavering faith. Okay, so let's zoom in on the day it all changed. A day that started just like any other, but was destined to be anything but common. He was completely immersed in his routine, reviewing charts, reading scans, making his rounds. But in the predictable cycles of the ICU, that line he walked between science and faith, it was about to be tested in a way he never, ever could have imagined. And then it happened. A new patient was admitted, a delicate heart condition. To him, it was just another case, right? Another life to fight for. Or so he thought. And this is the exact moment where his professional world and his personal world are about to collide head on. And it all came down to a name printed on a simple plastic bracelet. As he took the new case file, he felt it instantly, just a shiver down his spine. It was that gut instinct telling him this time was different. And in that single moment, it was like the whole world just froze. The beeping monitors, the hurried footsteps of the staff, the cold hospital light, everything just stopped. Time itself seemed to be holding its breath. He looked down at the chart in his hands, and he saw the name that would completely change the course of his day and maybe his entire life. Vanessa. The name was Vanessa, which also happened to be the name of his wife. In that single moment, the case was no longer just a case. It became a mission that carried an almost unbearable weight. An internal war just erupted inside him. On one side, you had the doctor, with a mind trained for ice-cold precision and objectivity, and he was fighting against the man, whose own heart was now beating frantically, completely overwhelmed by this terrifying coincidence. And suddenly, that name was just everywhere. It was on the headboard above her bed. It was on her ID bracelet. It was blinking across the electronic chart. But the most powerful place it appeared, it was now etched into his own conscience. There was absolutely no escaping it. Looking at the patient, he saw so much more than symptoms and data. He saw a young mother, and in her clear eyes, he saw this silent plea for help that just transcended any medical chart. It was a human connection, raw, powerful, and absolutely undeniable. The weight of it all just became immense. This wasn't about technical skill anymore. This was about seeing his own wife, his own family, reflected in the patient lying right there in front of him. And that responsibility, it was crushing. Which leaves us with this incredibly powerful question. When the life of a complete stranger suddenly mirrors your own, when their fate feels tangled up with yours, how do you act? What do you do? What if a simple sore throat wasn't so simple at all? We're about to dive into the gripping, true story of a young woman's journey, where a totally common illness spiraled into a fight, not just for her health, but for her very own grasp on reality. So the original account actually calls this chapter Deep Roots. And you know what? That's the perfect name for it. Because if you really want to understand how a life can get completely turned upside down, you first have to understand the world it was rooted in. And this is the central mystery we're really digging into here. How does a sore throat, something pretty much all of us have had, escalate into a full-blown fight for your own reality? To find the answer, we have to go right back to the beginning. Okay, so before all the chaos, there was Vila Pavão. It's a small, quiet town in Espírito Santo, Brazil. For Vanessa, this wasn't just some place on a map. It was the only world she had ever known. I want you to just imagine this for a second. A life surrounded by these huge fields and mountains, where your day starts with the smell of roasting coffee and the sound of birdsong. It was a place with deep traditions, a really close-knit community, where life was all about simplicity and hard work on the farm. It was predictable, it was peaceful, and it was home. But that predictable peace, well, it was shattered one Sunday, a day that should have been for rest. The first sign of trouble showed up pretty quietly, disguised as something any one of us could get. It all started with a fever and a sore throat. But this wasn't just any old sore throat. Vanessa described it as feeling like it was full of pins. Just think about that. A sharp, insistent pain that, along with the chills and just feeling awful, was getting worse by the minute. So her parents, obviously worried, took her to the local health post. A young doctor there examined her, running through the standard medical checklist called the Centaur criteria, and he found exactly what he was looking for: white spots on her throat, swollen lymph nodes, a high fever, and no cough. To him, the picture was crystal clear. The diagnosis was fast and confident. It's a bacterial infection, strep throat. For the family, the doctor's certainty brought this huge wave of relief. Finally, they had a name for the enemy, and they had a weapon to fight it, an immediate course of antibiotics. But that initial hope, that feeling of having a clear solution, was challenged almost right away by just a cruel twist of fate, something completely random and totally out of their control. The prescription was for penicillin, a simple fix, but the health post was out of it. So they went to the city pharmacy and just waited, holding on to this promise that one simple medication was their path back to a normal life. The next morning came, but the antibiotic didn't. And that feeling of relief, it started to fray, replaced by this kind of creeping sense of unease. What was going on? And then they got this shocking news. A truck carrying the pharmacy's supply had been in an accident. It's an almost unbelievable detail, right? Just as they had a clear path to a cure, the path itself was suddenly and completely wiped out. Her dad eventually found a different antibiotic in another city. After 2 weeks of treatment, it seemed to work. The fever vanished, her throat healed, and Vanessa was back at school. The crisis really seemed to be over. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Just as that relief settled in, Vanessa's body started to rebel in a new and really alarming way. The original infection seemed to be gone, but it had been replaced by something else entirely. This is where the story takes a huge turn. The initial sickness was familiar, but these new symptoms were just bizarre. It started with a strong, migrating pain that would literally jump from one knee to the other, then swollen joints, and then the most frightening thing of all, involuntary movements. Her arms and legs started jerking on their own, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't even write her own name. In tears, she tried to explain it to her father. "I can't control my body anymore. This is unconscious." Can you even imagine that feeling, being a passenger in your own body as it just moves with a mind of its own? The fear must have been absolutely overwhelming. Her father didn't hesitate for a second. They went straight back for medical help. But this time, they weren't just battling a mysterious physical illness. They were about to walk into a battle just to be believed. In the doctor's office, Vanessa described her new reality, the uncontrollable jerks and twitches that had just taken over her life. She was describing a terrifying, deeply physical experience. The doctor, however, barely seemed to even consider her physical symptoms. He listened, and then really quickly, with this air of dismissive certainty, he delivered his verdict. "Dear, your problem is emotional." Just think about that. Her terrifying physical symptoms, the swollen joints, the twitching limbs, the moving pain, they were completely dismissed. Instead of a physical diagnosis, she got a referral to a psychiatrist. Her very real physical nightmare was being officially relabeled as just a problem in her mind. And this leaves us with a really critical question, one that thousands of patients face every single year. When your body is sending clear signals that something is wrong, what happens when the very experts you trust refuse to listen? Vanessa's story forces us all to consider that devastating gap that can open up between a patient's reality and a doctor's diagnosis.
Today, we've got a real medical detective story for you. We're going to follow a family's absolutely desperate search for answers and uncover a truly bizarre condition where the body's own defense system turns on itself. So let's get right into it. So our story kicks off with a journey. A young girl, Vanessa, is having these frightening, uncontrollable movements. Her family, who've pretty much lost all faith in their local doctors, packs up and travels to the city of Linhares. They're just hoping, praying, really, to finally find an answer. I mean, can you imagine the weight on their shoulders? This wasn't just about getting a second opinion. They were on a quest for hope itself. And this quote, it just says it all, right? Look at those words, worried and distrustful. It wasn't just that they were confused. They had this deep-seated gut feeling that the answers they'd been given were just plain wrong. And that feeling is what pushed them to find a real expert. And that is exactly where the detective of our story comes in. The one person who is finally going to connect all of these strange and terrifying dots. So they get a referral to a Dr. Sue, a top neurologist in the area. And her reputation, well, it speaks for itself. She was known for being incredibly meticulous, super attentive, and just having this deep, deep well of medical knowledge. For this family who felt like they were at the end of their rope, she was their best and maybe their last chance. Now, here's what makes a great doctor and a great detective. Instead of just rushing to a conclusion, Dr. Sue does the most important thing. She just listens. She patiently pieces together every single detail of Vanessa's symptoms, building a complete timeline. And believe me, this careful, methodical approach is the key to solving this whole mystery. Okay, so now we get to the big moment, the turning point, where a name is finally given to the monster this family has been fearing. This is the question, isn't it? The one that's been haunting them for weeks. What is causing these bizarre, involuntary movements? What in the world is going on inside her body? And then Dr. Sue provides the answer. It's called Sydenham's chorea. You might have heard of it by its old, kind of spooky name, St. Vitus's dance. It's a neurological disorder, and it perfectly explains those rapid, jerky movements Vanessa's been having. But the diagnosis doesn't stop there. And this is absolutely crucial. The chorea, it isn't the disease itself. It's a symptom. It's a huge neurological clue that's pointing to a much, much bigger problem hiding underneath: rheumatic fever. So, what is actually going on here? Well, the best way to think about it is like a civil war breaking out inside the body, where the immune system gets tragically, horribly confused. See, rheumatic fever is what we call an autoimmune disease. And what that means is that the very system that's designed to protect you, your immune system, makes a terrible mistake. It stops recognizing its own team and starts attacking your own healthy cells. And what kicks off all this internal chaos? You're going to be surprised. It all starts with an incredibly common bacteria, Streptococcus pyogenes. Yep, the exact same one that causes strep throat. This slide really breaks it down perfectly. So first, the bacteria invades, usually a sore throat. Second, the immune system, right on cue, sounds the alarm. But here it is, the critical error. Step 3, confusion. The system gets its wires crossed and can no longer tell the difference between the bad guy and its own healthy tissues. So what does it do? It attacks. It's a case of friendly fire, causing damage to the joints, the heart, and in Vanessa's case, the brain. And that's exactly how Dr. Sue explained it. The initial response was perfect. The body's army went to war against a real invader. The absolute tragedy is that after the battle was won, it couldn't recognize its own side anymore. But listen, a diagnosis is only half the battle, right? Now let's see how this incredible insight from Dr. Sue actually leads to a real plan for recovery. So on the left, you see the stakes are incredibly high: potential heart damage, arthritis, lasting neurological issues. But on the right, you see Dr. Sue's clear multi-step plan of attack. First, antibiotics to wipe out any leftover bacteria. Then, specific meds to get the symptoms under control. And maybe, most important of all, rigorous long-term monitoring. And with that plan, Dr. Sue gave the family something they hadn't had in a very long time: reassurance. Just imagine the wave of relief washing over them when they heard those words. I know these movements are scary, but they are treatable. You are going to be fine. And you know what? She was. The treatment worked exactly as planned. The disease was brought under control. The scary movements stopped, and Vanessa got to go back to her normal life. All because one amazing doctor took the time to listen, to think, and to connect the dots. This whole case really leaves us with a powerful final thought, doesn't it? This entire life-altering, terrifying ordeal, it all started with a common sore throat that probably wasn't treated properly. It really makes you stop and think, how often does something so simple, left unchecked, end up having these profound, totally unforeseen consequences? You know how they say a single moment can change your whole life? Well, we're about to dive into a story that's pretty much proof of that. It's all about a fateful encounter. Seriously, could a single Saturday afternoon change your life forever? It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But for Vanessa and Stefan, this wasn't fiction. This was their reality. One totally normal Saturday completely flipped their world upside down. So let's get into how it all went down. Okay, so our story kicks off in this little town, Villa Pavam. It started out as just another day, nothing special. But by the end of it, two totally different worlds were about to collide, and it would kick off a future that, honestly, neither of them could have ever seen coming. This is really where it all begins. So first, let's meet Vanessa. She's just living a pretty quiet life in her hometown. On this particular Saturday, she's helping out at a church festival. She's even a little under the weather, getting over a cold. just going about her day with absolutely no idea her whole life is about to take a massive turn. And then there's Stefan. He's a truck driver, a good guy with a big heart, and his life is pretty much on the road. He just happens to be passing through Villa Pavone, looking for a spot to take a break. He has no clue he's about to find something, and someone way more important. So, how does this all happen? Well, Stefan just happens to stop at the exact festival Vanessa's at. They start talking, and bam, the connection is just instant. It's electric. Pretty soon, Stefan is making these long trips back to Villa Pavot again and again, just for her. He was just so taken by her strength, her resilience. And for her, she was completely charmed by his kindness and all these incredible stories from his life as a traveler. But that initial spark, that's just the start, isn't it? You've got to build on it. So let's see how they took that amazing first connection and turned it into a real lifelong partnership. So their relationship really grew over time. You have to imagine it. Stefan out on these long haul trips and then these incredibly heartfelt reunions. You'd think the distance would be tough, but for them, it actually seemed to make their bond even stronger. And the proposal? It wasn't some huge over the top thing. It was simple, full of emotion, just perfect. That led to a small, cozy wedding with their closest friends and family, and they started their new life together, right there in her hometown of Villa Pavone. And this new life they built, it was about more than just being happy. It was actually kind of healing. Vanessa had these past health issues, rheumatic fever, that had always been a big worry for her. But now, in this new, peaceful, stable life with Stefan, it was like all those old fears just faded away. All right, so their life together is solid, they're happy, and they realize they're ready for the next big step. It was time to start a family. Now, because of her medical history, the doctors were, pretty cautious during the pregnancy. Totally understandable. But it turns out there was nothing to worry about. The whole 9 months went by without a single hitch. It was a really happy, joyful time, and Vanessa felt healthier and more alive than ever. And Stefan, he would often say to her, "Our little girl is going to be just as strong as you are." I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? It shows how excited he was to be a dad, but also just how much he admired his wife. And then their daughter Sarah was born. She was perfectly healthy, so full of life. Her arrival just brought this whole new level of joy and purpose into their home. They just completely embraced being parents. So their family feels complete, home life is great, and you know what happens next? A new dream starts to take shape. This time, it was about building something together, not just for them, but for their whole community. Yep, they decided to start their own business. And look, this wasn't just about making money. The real goal was to build a future where Stefan could finally get off the road for good. It was a huge leap of faith, really, all driven by this deep desire to build every single part of their lives side by side. And it was Vanessa who had the big idea. Their town needed a really good supermarket. It was a brilliant business move, for sure, but the heart of it was bringing Stefan home. So with the support of her family, she just dove in and took the lead. And the grand opening, wow, it was a huge event for the whole town. And the place was an absolute hit from the moment the doors opened. Okay, so the business is a runaway success. But you have to wonder, right? Did this new super demanding project mess with that peaceful, happy life they had worked so hard to build? Let's see. Well, it completely transformed their world, but for the better. Think about it. Before, their life was quiet and so much of it was shaped by Stefan being away. After, it was this dynamic, shared adventure. They weren't just a couple anymore. They were true partners in every single way, building everything together. In this new life, Vanessa really came into her own as a business leader. I mean, she was amazing at it, but she never stopped being a totally dedicated, hands-on mom to Sarah. And Stefan? He was her #1 fan, just in awe of her courage and determination. Their evenings weren't about waiting for him to call anymore. They were filled with excitement, talking and dreaming about the future, about the day he could finally hang up the keys to his truck for good. So it all started with a chance encounter at a little town festival, and it turned into this incredible shared destiny. Vanessa and Stefan, they really built a life in perfect balance. Their story is just such a great reminder that sometimes the most ordinary, everyday moments can spark the most extraordinary lives. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What little moments in your own life might be shaping your destiny right now? Today, we're diving into a story that's truly a race against time, a fight against an enemy you can't even see. It all starts with a mystery. This is Vanessa's story. You know that feeling, that sense that everything is just a little too heavy, like you're carrying the world on your shoulders? I think we've all been there. But for Vanessa, this wasn't just stress. It was a sign of something much, much more serious. So, where does a story like this even begin? Well, for Vanessa, it started with whispers, really subtle changes in her body that were just so easy to brush off. So let's meet Vanessa. She's 37 years old and she is juggling, well, everything. She's a businesswoman, a mom, a wife. You get the picture. Her life is this constant, hectic balancing act. And from the outside, she's successful, she's got it all together. There was absolutely no reason for her to think anything was seriously wrong. The first hints were just fatigue and an irregular heartbeat. I mean, who hasn't felt that? It's the kind of thing you'd blame on a long week or maybe one too many cups of coffee, right? It would happen at the most random times, like in the middle of the supermarket or while driving her daughter to school. It was annoying for sure, but alarming? Nah, not yet anyway. But you know how these things go? Those little whispers, they started getting louder, and soon they became a roar. What had been just a minor inconvenience was rapidly turning into something she absolutely could not ignore. I mean, can you imagine your own body just turning on you with no warning at all? That's what was happening. These episodes were happening more and more often, and they were completely out of her control. There was no pattern, no rhyme or reason, which honestly made the whole thing even more terrifying. The way she put it is just so powerful. She said it was like running an invisible marathon. Just think about that. You're sitting perfectly still, maybe on your couch, but your heart is just pounding, hammering away like you're in the middle of a sprint for your life. It would leave her totally exhausted, breathless, and feeling this strange kind of weakness she'd never ever experienced before. So things went from bad to worse. Her condition went from being just unpredictable to completely, utterly incapacitating. We're talking fatigue and palpitations so intense they would literally stop her in her tracks. Normal life? It was becoming impossible. Her husband, Stefan, he was trying to be helpful, you know? He suggested it was probably just stress. But Vanessa, her gut was just screaming at her. She just knew. She knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. And that was the moment she decided, that's it, I have to find out what's going on. And that decision brings us to a huge turning point in her story. She finally goes to see a doctor, just desperate to understand what in the world is happening inside her own body. So the doctor listens to her whole story, does an examination, and then he asks this kind of strange, almost old-fashioned question. And this question, it turns out to be the very first piece of a puzzle that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Okay, so what on earth is rheumatism in the blood? Well, it's basically an old-timey term for something we now call rheumatic heart disease. And get this, it's a condition that can start with something as simple as strep throat. If you get rheumatic fever from that and it isn't treated right, it can silently, invisibly, do damage to your heart valves for decades. The crazy part is it's often missed because the thing that started it all happened way back when you were a kid. And just like that, boom, decades of clues that seemed totally unrelated suddenly clicked into place. The doctor discovers a heart murmur she had no idea she had. He connects it back to her childhood, to all those throat infections she used to get. That was the trigger. The crushing fatigue, the shortness of breath, it all pointed to this one diagnosis that had been hiding right there in plain sight for years. Now, you'd think getting a diagnosis would be a huge relief, right? And for a second, it was. But that feeling vanished almost immediately, and it was replaced by a new and honestly a much more terrifying kind of race against the clock. So the doctor says you need to see a specialist, a cardiologist named Dr. Dario, and it needs to be urgent. So Vanessa makes the call, her heart is just pounding, she's scared but also hopeful. And then the receptionist delivers this absolute gut punch. The first available appointment? It's in 3 months. 3 months. Just let that sink in. When you feel like your body is failing you with every passing minute, 3 months feels like an eternity. For Vanessa, it was just impossible. An unbearable amount of time to have to wait for someone to help her. You can just feel her desperation. She's pleading with the receptionist, Alceline, trying to explain, my heart is racing, I can't breathe. She knew deep down in her bones that she wasn't going to make it 3 months. But Aliceline, the receptionist, she heard that panic in Vanessa's voice. She heard the fear, and she promised she'd see what she could do. And then, later that same morning, the phone rings. An unexpected call. It was a lifeline. Someone had canceled. Just a total stroke of luck. A spot had just opened up for that very afternoon. Can you make it? The answer was a definite, resounding yes. And just like that, without one single phone call, everything changed. All that agonizing waiting, it was over. The real journey, the one to get answers and finally start treatment, it was starting right now. It was like a switch was flipped. In an instant, her whole family mobilized. Her husband, Stefan, was actually away on a trip. He turned his car around immediately to go meet her. Vanessa dropped her daughter off with her grandparents, jumped in her car, and started the long drive to the specialist's office, which was in a totally different city. So there she is, on the road. She has no idea what the doctor is going to say, no idea what her future is going to look like. The road ahead was completely uncertain, both literally and figuratively. But here's the thing. She wasn't just scared. She was filled with this incredible determination, and she knew her family had her back. And that's where her story leaves us for now. On this long road, her heart still racing, driving toward a future that is about to be completely rewritten. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What answers and what new battles are waiting for her at the end of that journey?
It often starts with just a whisper, a feeling deep down that something isn't quite right. For a patient named Vanessa, that little whisper turned into a life-changing journey, right into the very core of her own heart. Let's follow her story and see what that journey was all about. And these are the words that kicked the whole thing off. Simple symptoms, sure, but they were carrying a really urgent message. This is Vanessa, telling her story, describing the feelings that finally pushed her to get some answers. It's a moment a lot of us can probably relate to. That feeling of knowing something's off, but you have no idea what. And this is what that signal looks like. A rhythm that's just out of sync. These symptoms weren't just some random fatigue. They were a legitimate distress call from the most important organ in her entire body. So that search for answers gets started at a cardiologist's office, where that quiet whisper is about to get a whole lot louder. So Vanessa walks into Dr. Dario Santuchi's office. Right away, she sees these certificates on the wall, not just for medicine, but for teaching and community work. She gets a good vibe. The doctor was young, serious, but he had this kindness about him that immediately put her at ease. She lays out all her symptoms and then mentions a really crucial piece of her past. She'd had rheumatic fever as a kid. And that turns out to be a major clue in this whole medical mystery. And then you get this huge moment. Dr. Dario places the stethoscope on her chest, and you can see his expression just subtly shift. He hears it, an abnormal murmur, a sound that just doesn't belong, and it's messing with the perfect rhythm of her heartbeat. This is the exact moment a vague feeling becomes a hard fact. Okay, so hearing the problem is one thing, but seeing it, that's a whole different ballgame. The next step is all about getting a crystal clear picture of what is actually happening inside Vanessa's heart. So Dr. Dario sends Vanessa for an echocardiogram, which is basically an ultrasound for the heart. And for Vanessa and her husband, Stefan, you can just imagine this is it. This is the moment of truth. What are those images going to show? The suspense must have been incredible. And here it is. The answer? Severe mitral stenosis with insufficiency. So what in the world does that actually mean? Well, think of the mitral valve like a really important one-way door between two chambers of the heart. In her case, that door isn't opening wide enough and it's not closing tightly enough either. This is creating a major bottleneck, kind of like a traffic jam, causing blood to back up into her lungs. And that is not good. So with the diagnosis locked in, Dr. Dario delivers the news. He's calm, he's direct, and there's no room for doubt. The problem is mechanical, so it needs a mechanical solution. 3 words that just change everything. The only option is surgery. So surgery it is. There's no other path forward. Let's really dig into what this unavoidable journey, this surgery, actually involves. And right away, she's faced with this massive choice between 2 types of replacement valves. First, there's a biological one. It lasts about 10 years, and you don't need any long-term meds. The other option is a mechanical valve. That one lasts a lifetime, and it's a big but, it means taking blood thinners every single day for the rest of your life. It's a huge, life-altering decision either way. And look, this surgery isn't just about feeling less tired.
It's about stopping a chain reaction of terrible events, the heart stretching out, pressure building up in the lungs, and eventually, complete heart failure. The stakes could not be any higher. Okay, open heart surgery. Those 3 words alone are enough to scare anyone, right? So let's pull back the curtain on it. Dr. Dario breaks down the entire procedure for Vanessa and now for us too. It all starts the day before the actual surgery, with admission to the hospital and getting everything prepped. Then, on the day of, she's brought to the surgical center, put under anesthesia, and hooked up to all sorts of intensive monitoring. From there, the surgeons make an incision and open the sternum to get right to the heart. Now, this next part it's just mind-blowing, really. A machine, a heart-lung bypass machine, completely takes over the job of circulating and oxygenating her blood. This lets the surgeons actually stop her heart so they can work on it. It's incredible. They take out the bad valve, sew the new one in, and then restart the heart. After that, they close up the sternum with steel wires and stitch up the skin.
And you might think recovery would take forever, but check this out. It starts almost right away. After surgery, she goes to the coronary ICU. But by day 1, the very next day, she's already sitting up and doing some light exercises. Day 2, she's out of the ICU and in a regular room. And if everything goes to plan, by day 4, she can go home. That is an astonishingly fast turnaround.
Okay, so we've talked about the procedure, the mechanics of it all. But that's only half the story. The other half, which is just as critical, it's all about the people. It's about the team that comes together to face this journey. Yeah, this is no solo act. A surgery like this is like a symphony of specialists. You've got our cardiologist, Dr. Dario, the 2 cardiac surgeons, Dr. Flavio and Dr. Gabriel, an anesthesiologist, a perfusionist who runs that bypass machine, and a whole team of amazing nurses and technicians. Everybody has to be working in perfect sync. And if Vanessa had any lingering doubts, Dr. Dario says something that just erases them completely. He gives her the most powerful endorsement you could possibly imagine. He says, if I needed to operate on my own family, this is the team I would choose. I mean, you just can't get a stronger statement of trust than that. And that's really what it all boils down to, isn't it? The whole thing is built not just on incredible skill, but on this deep, profound trust between the patient, her family, and the entire medical team. Okay, here's a little detail that I thought was absolutely fascinating. Before this incredibly complex heart surgery, one of the most critical pre-op steps is a trip to the dentist. A dentist. Why? Well, it's to get rid of any risk of bacteria from your mouth traveling to the heart and causing a super dangerous infection called endocarditis on that brand new valve. It just goes to show you how meticulous and careful this team's preparation really is. So, the medical plan is set. The team is ready. But for Vanessa and Stefan, that's when a whole new set of questions starts to bubble up. The what-ifs. The surgery can fix the mechanical problem inside the heart, but the human journey, the emotional healing, that's just beginning. It's such a powerful reminder that even with all our amazing medicine, the path forward is navigated not just by surgeons and machines, but by courage and trust. It really makes you wonder, when you're faced with something you just can't avoid, what gives you the strength to take that first step?
Today, we're diving into a really profound human story, one that takes place right on the razor's edge of life and death. And it all centers on 2 people, a patient and her surgeon, as they prepare for a surgery where meticulous science and deep, deep faith are about to meet. Right away, you can feel that the stakes could not possibly be higher. This is the prayer from our patient, Vanessa. And you can hear it, right? It's not just a plea for her own life. It's this desperate wish to stay a mom to her little girl, Sarah. That one fear is what drives this entire story. So let's start with Vanessa. Imagine facing a surgery this risky. For her, the one thing she's absolutely terrified of, more than anything else, is the thought of leaving her child behind. So you have to picture this. She's going through all the intense medical prep, blood tests, heart scans, the whole thing. But at the same time, she's on this other equally intense spiritual journey. Every single morning, 4 a.m., she was up, praying, just building up her faith for what was coming. But here's the thing. Vanessa wasn't just relying on her own faith. Her journey sparked something truly incredible in her community. They got a call for help, and boy, did they answer it. Now, the heart surgery she was facing was, well, it was incredibly complex. Her surgeon, Dr. Flavio, knew that to have a real shot at success, they had to be ready for absolutely anything. So he made a critical suggestion. let's launch a blood donation campaign to make sure we have more than enough on hand. And the response was just, wow. It was overwhelming. Her husband, Stefan, got the campaign going right away. And the local blood center was flooded with people. Friends, family, people who didn't even know them showed up. In no time at all, they had all the blood they needed, not just for Vanessa, but for a bunch of other patients too. You can just imagine the emotional impact of that. Seeing all these people show up, Stefan turns to his wife, tears in his eyes, and says this to her. You see, it was never just about the blood bags. It was this powerful way of love and solidarity, and it made them both so much stronger. Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk about the other key player in this story, the surgeon, Dr. Dario Santuchi. And you have to understand the immense weight of responsibility that he was carrying. I mean, look at this level of prep. Dr. Dario's approach to coordination was just next level. He made a dedicated WhatsApp group called Caso Vanessa, the Vanessa case, and a shared Google Drive. This meant every single piece of information, every exam, was instantly available to the whole team, and they had meeting after meeting to go over every little detail, making sure everyone was perfectly in sync. And this is where you really see the two sides of the surgeon. To Vanessa, his patient, he was the picture of calm and confidence. Everything's ready, we're good to go. But at home, this case was really weighing on him. He opened up to his wife, telling her about Vanessa, a woman his age with a young kid, and admitted that this one just felt different. It was personal. So all of this leads us to the eve of the surgery. And this night turned out to be one of intense anxiety, for sure, but also one of these profound, really unexpected human connections for both Vanessa and her doctor. So Vanessa's in her hospital room for the night, and you could just feel the fear in the air. It was palpable. And that's when a nurse named Camille came in. She could sense just how overwhelmed Vanessa was. And what Camilla said next just changed everything. She actually shared that she had also been through a delicate heart procedure herself. So these weren't just the standard words of comfort from a nurse. This was real, earned empathy. She created this genuine bond with Vanessa that went way beyond just nurse and patient, and it meant the world to her. Meanwhile, at the same time, over at the surgeon's house, Dr. Dario was trying to unwind, but his wife could see it. She could see the toll this was taking. She knew his connection to this case went deeper than just his job, and she saw the personal weight he was carrying on his shoulders. And she didn't just offer him comfort. In a way, she gave him the very same kind of support that was getting Vanessa through it all. She promised to pray for Vanessa, reminding him that, yeah, his skill is incredible, but it can be strengthened by faith. So in this beautiful way, both the patient and her doctor were being held up by the exact same spiritual reassurance. Okay, this is it. The moment has arrived. All the preparations are done, the team is ready, the room is sterile, and the surgery is about to kick off. So as Vanessa is making that final trip down the hall to the operating room, her heart is just pounding. But when she gets there, she's met by Dr. Dario and this team that is just radiating calm and focus. The anxiety in the air just vanished. It was replaced by this feeling of complete synchronized readiness. And then at 7 a.m. on the dot, it begins. And it's like watching a perfectly choreographed dance. Every move is precise. The anesthesia team renders Vanessa unconscious. Intubation secures her breathing. They place an arterial line, which gives them a live beat-by-beat view of her heart. It's just a symphony of scientific precision. So here we are. The surgery is happening. All of that meticulous planning, the community that rallied around her, all those late-night prayers, the quiet professional worries, everything has led to this one single moment, in this room where Vanessa's heart and her life are in the hands of her team. It really leaves you with a powerful thought, doesn't it? As all the monitors beep and the scalpels do their work, guided by years and years of science and data, you have to wonder about those other invisible forces at play. What this story seems to show us is that maybe they aren't opposing forces at all. So in that clean, sterile, scientific room, perhaps the real question isn't where one ends and the other begins, but how on earth they manage to work together.
You know, in a hospital, life and death can be separated by nothing more than a single wall. And this is the incredible story of two families, one on each side of that wall, and the unbelievable events that would connect their lives forever.
So let's set the scene. In bed 07 of the coronary ICU,
a woman named Vanessa is literally fighting for her life. Her own heart has given out, and the only thing keeping her going is an ECMO machine. It's basically acting as her heart and her lungs. She is just desperately waiting for a new one.
Her doctor, Dr. Dario, is feeling this immense weight on his shoulders. He knows Vanessa is completely out of time. Every single beat you see on that monitor, it's a borrowed moment. It's this fragile hold on life that depends entirely on a miracle.
And this quote from the medical team, it just sums up the whole paradox of organ transplantation, doesn't it? For one family to get this incredible gift of life, another family has to go through the absolute worst loss imaginable. It's this delicate, painful balance of hope and grief, all playing out right next to each other.
And on this exact day, just on the other side of that wall, in the general ICU, Dr. Dario's good friend, Dr. Sandro, is treating a patient whose life is coming to an end. He's a 17-year-old boy who had a terrible fall from a bridge, suffering a massive head trauma.
So, the young man has been declared brain dead. Medically speaking, his life is over, but his heart is still beating, which makes him a potential organ donor. There's just one huge obstacle standing in the way of this potential miracle.
The boy's legal guardian, it's his grandfather, and when the doctors approach him about the possibility of organ donation, his answer is immediate. It's a hard, absolute no. To him, the very idea is just, it's unthinkable. Now, to really get this, you have to understand where he's coming from. This isn't a man who lacks compassion, not at all. He's a simple man, with deep-rooted traditional views. And to him, this feels like a violation, a desecration of his grandson's body. His refusal, it's born from fear and a lack of information, not from a bad heart.
The doctors know right away that throwing medical facts and jargon at him is just going to make things worse. It'll push him further away. If they have any shot at all, they have to connect with him on a human level. So they call in Dr. Rodrigo Tardan. This guy is known around the hospital not just for his medical skills, but for his incredible empathy. He has this rare gift of being able to truly reach people when they're in their absolute darkest moments. Dr. Rodrigo sits down with this grieving man not as a doctor, but as a person. He doesn't lecture, he just connects. He acknowledges the grandfather's pain, but then he gently offers a different way to look at it. He's not talking about procedures. He's talking about legacy, about this chance to do something truly noble out of this awful tragedy. And slowly, you can just feel something start to shift. Through all that fog of grief, the grandfather starts to see it. And he says these heartbreaking words, realizing that his grandson's body is just that, a body, and that the most important part of him, his spirit, could actually live on. And then something happens that you just can't make up. It feels like destiny. As the grandfather is leaving his grandson's room, just overwhelmed with everything, he steps into the hallway. And at that exact same moment, Vanessa's husband, Stefan, also steps into the hall, drowning in his own sorrow. Their eyes meet. No words are exchanged. Just two men in two different worlds of pain, sharing this one silent, powerful moment of connection. That one brief, silent encounter, combined with Dr. Rodrigo's gentle words, it was enough. It broke through all the grandfather's final barriers. The wall he'd put up just crumbled. So on May 7th, 2018, everything changes in the blink of an eye. I mean, look at this timeline. At exactly 5 p.m., the team gets the news they've been praying for. And then, just 1 minute later, a second piece of news comes in that is so astonishing, it turns this hopeful moment into something truly miraculous. First, the grandfather gives his consent. He makes the heroic choice to turn his personal, unimaginable loss into a life-saving gift. He says yes. And then, the lab results. They find out the young donor isn't just a compatible match for Vanessa. He is a perfect 100% immunological match. This means her body is almost guaranteed not to reject the new heart. The odds of that happening? They're astronomical. We're talking like 1 in a million. It is a miracle on top of a miracle. But the fight is far from over. I mean, they solve one impossible problem, and a whole new set of them pop up. Look at this list. Vanessa is way too sick to be moved. This hospital? They've never ever done a heart transplant before. They need to get 4 top-tier cardiac surgeons on site like yesterday. So they make a call. We're doing it right here, right now. The first and only heart transplant in the history of this entire region. Okay, so 7 days after this whole thing started, The day of the surgery is here. The whole hospital is just buzzing with this crazy mix of hope and insane tension. This isn't just about saving one person anymore. It's about making medical history.
By noon, the surgeons are there. The teams are ready. The surgery is all set for 2 o'clock. Everything is perfectly aligned. They are so close to the finish line, you can almost taste it. And then, at 1:30, just 30 minutes before they're supposed to start, the absolute unthinkable happens.
Alarms start screaming from Vanessa's ECMO machine, the very machine that's been keeping her alive. Her oxygen levels plummet. The system is failing. What this means is the machine can't transfer oxygen into her blood anymore. So even though she's on maximum life support, her body is literally suffocating from the inside out.
The team scrambles, trying to figure out what's wrong, and they quickly get the diagnosis. It's a catastrophe. Huge blood clots have formed, and they've totally clogged the ECMO circuit. Even worse, they've been forced into her lungs, causing a massive, life-ending pulmonary embolism. So after this whole week of impossible odds, emotional breakthroughs, and medical miracles, they are closer than they have ever been. But now, with the donor heart literally waiting, chaos is erupting in the ICU, and Vanessa's life is fading faster than ever. They have only minutes to spare. What on earth can they possibly do now?
You know, some cases, they stick with you. They're not just about medicine. They're about those moments that push you to your absolute limit, the ones that make you question everything you thought you knew. Well, we're about to dive into a life and death story that did exactly that.
All right, so let's set the scene. It all starts with this deceptive moment of peace. You've got Dr. Dario Santuchi. He's at his computer in the coronary unit. He's just come off this incredibly turbulent, emotionally draining night, saving a patient named Vanessa. And right now, everything looks like it's on track. He's thinking, you know, the worst is finally over. So it's 6 in the morning. The monitors are just beeping away, all rhythmic and steady. You can almost feel that collective sigh of relief in the air. But, well, you know how these stories go. This calm is a total illusion. It's that quiet moment right before the storm absolutely breaks. And just like that, everything shatters. A nurse's voice, just filled with alarm, cuts right through that quiet. 500 milliliters of blood just suddenly gushing into the patient's chest drain. Now that is a terrifying, terrifying sign that something has gone catastrophically wrong. So Dr. Dario, he just leaps from his chair. I mean, any exhaustion he felt from the night before, it's gone. Instantly replaced by pure adrenaline. The clock is ticking again, and every single second is critical. A brand new fight for Vanessa's life has just kicked off. Okay, so the team scrambles. They go into overdrive. Dr. Dario's mind is just racing. What could it be? Did a suture break? A torn vessel? He orders this whole barrage of tests, right? But the obvious stuff gets ruled out fast. The echo shows her new heart is beating perfectly. Chest x-ray? Totally clear. So the problem isn't mechanical, which means the real, baffling surprise is hiding somewhere in her blood. And then the situation just escalates at this unbelievable speed. That first 500 milliliters of blood loss, it triples. We're talking 1,500 mLs now. This changes absolutely everything. It's not just a surgical problem anymore. You know, a leak they can patch. No, this is metabolic. Her body, for some reason, has just lost its ability to clot blood. So now they're stuck in this absolute nightmare of a loop. They're pumping in bags of blood, plasma, platelets, everything they've got. And they're just watching it drain right back out moments later. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom. And the craziest part, on paper, the lab reports say everything is under control. But the reality, what's happening right in front of their eyes, is a patient bleeding to death for no reason they can find. They're fighting an enemy they can't even see. They are desperate. I mean, what do? They come up with one last-ditch idea. This super expensive, highly controlled medication normally used for hemophiliacs. It's a total long shot, but it's the only one they have left. So they send the request to the transfusion center, and the response comes back, and it's just devastating. Denied. And why? Because according to the lab results on paper, there's no clinical justification. The team just smacks right into a bureaucratic brick wall. They are officially out of options. Okay, so just when all hope seems totally lost, this new energy just bursts into the unit. The hospital director sees what's going on and he gets it. Conventional thinking is not cutting it. He says something like, "This is an atypical case, and for that we need atypical measures." And boy, is he about to get them. And in walks Dr. Alessandra. She's an infectious disease specialist, and she's just a force of nature. Brilliant mind, boundless energy, and what her team lovingly calls a little touch of craziness. And you have to picture the scene because it's almost comical. She's in her workout clothes, literally ready to go for her morning run, with a lab coat just thrown on top, and she's walking into the most intense crisis in the entire hospital. So they explain the whole situation to her, the bleeding, the denied medication, and she doesn't even hesitate. Not for a second. With this confident smile that just cuts right through all the tension in that room, she says the three simple words everyone was desperate to hear. Leave it to me. And this right here tells you everything you need to know about her character. That morning run she had planned, it just turned into a completely different kind of race, a race for a life. Look at this. Step 1, runs postponed. Step 2, she's in her blue car flying at high speed to the hemophilia center. Step 3, bureaucracy, red tape, she's got no time for it. And step 4, she just opens the cabinet herself, grabs the vials, and walks out. In that moment, she chose to save a life over following a rule. Simple as that. She rushes back to the unit, vials in hand. The team gets that medication into Vanessa immediately. And then it happens. The miracle they were all praying for. The bleeding, this unstoppable hemorrhage that had the entire team completely stumped, it just stops. Just like that. The crisis is over. So later that day, Dr. Dario's back home and he's telling his wife the whole insane story. The sudden crisis, the frantic search for answers, this maverick doctor who just threw the rule book out the window to save the day. And his wife says what he's already thinking. This sounds like a movie. And her words are the perfect pivot point for this whole story, right? Because it stops being just about a medical crisis. It becomes about something much bigger. The unwritten rules of saving a life. Yeah, because getting the bleeding to stop, that was really just the beginning. This whole experience acted like a catalyst for Dr. Dario. It pushed him to re-examine not just his own life, but the very nature of what he does for a living. It's a real look at how that kind of extreme pressure can totally forge a new perspective. See, for years, Dr. Dario's gods were science, logic, and protocol. That's what you rely on as a doctor, right? But this case, it showed him the limits of all that. All the data, every single test, they all led to a dead end. The solution came from a doctor who ignored the rules and trusted her gut. What a powerful lesson, huh? That sometimes the most critical variable can't be measured in a lab. And that started him on a path of seeking, something more. So this whole reevaluation of what a medical hero looks like, is it the person who follows the rules or the one who breaks them? It started to dredge up some old memories for him. It made him think back to this figure he had idolized when he was a young, aspiring doctor. And it forced him to confront just how much his own definition of a hero had completely changed over the years. It's really a tale of two perspectives. When he was a young idealist, Dario was absolutely captivated by the story of Che Guevara, the doctor. He read about him swimming across a river to treat leprosy patients, and to him, that was the ultimate symbol of compassion. He thought, I want to be that man. But then, with time and experience, he learned about what he calls the dark and cruel facade. He found out about Guevara's role in supervising the executions of political prisoners, and suddenly the hero of his youth looked more like a symbol of brutality hiding behind a mask of justice. Now, this wasn't about politics for him. It was a really personal struggle to reconcile the simple ideals of his youth with a much more complicated,